The Rose family, being scientists, always had their place in the Royal Academy. Although only the name remains of this family, each member of the family suffered a painful death. One girl was the smartest of the family, and so a great deal of responsibility fell on her shoulders in trying to feed the rest. Until one day, after 3 unsuccessful attempts at marriage, the hunter Carmen proposed to her to become his wife. He was very handsome and also had the status of a baron, since he was born into a family that helped found the kingdom. His sudden proposal haunted her, looking for a catch in it, but at the same time she had no reason to refuse, knowing what a terrible situation she was in. After all, this union was the only attempt to save their family from extinction. That was until she heard something she clearly didn't want to know. The atmosphere around the estate was rainy and gloomy, as terrible as the news she had just heard. The white-haired man confessed that he only loved Sharchin, and his face showed confidence and seriousness as he said this. The girl was horrified to hear how her husband could love his adopted daughter. Carmen did not hide his disgust when he confessed to Eliana that his heart belonged to another. She couldn't believe her ears, how he could say so easily something that meant nothing to him. It was still raining outside, reminding her of what had just happened. She watched him walk, realizing that this marriage was not as easy as it seemed. The girl thought how insignificant she was, that she didn't even notice how tears began to flow down her face. Every tear reminded her of the terrible past in which she tried to do everything for her family. Finally calming down, Eliana raised her hand to her cheek, clearly thinking about something. After thinking it over for a bit, she firmly decided for herself that she would never be weak again. Now all she had to do was come up with a plan of action to survive this fake marriage. As she walked to her desk, thoughts came into her head about what she could do best. She waved her pen and began to write something. Sitting at the table, the girl pronounced each word, already imagining how Carmen would regret what he had done. After the rain, dew formed on the plants. Light was coming through the windows of the mansion, indicating that it was already light. After waking up, Eliana went to explore the house and, opening the door to one of the rooms, found something interesting. When she went inside, her face twisted seeing how dirty it was, thinking that no one had used this place for a long time. She opened the window to clear the dusty air. Approaching one of the bookcases, she began to sort through them in search of something that would help her gain strength. Having found what she needed, she threw several books on the reading table and began to study them. All the books were written in the royal language, but not everyone could read it. But for the girl, this was not a problem, since she had worked as a tutor for many years. Meanwhile, the servant was already in the Baron's chambers, informing him that his wife was in the library. Carmen immediately wondered why she suddenly needed a library, to which the butler answered in confusion. While Eliana was enthusiastically reading each book one after another, she did not notice what was happening around her. The guy was already walking quickly towards her in the library. Having reached the place, he opened the door, remaining in the doorway. Without further ado, he immediately asked what she was doing there, thereby signaling his presence. The girl turned to him carefree, answering that she was reading books. He didn't understand why she was so happy, and only he started talking about yesterday's conversation. Suddenly, he stopped abruptly, looking up at her, as he heard a blow. Eliana slammed the book shut and, as if nothing had happened, reminded him that she meant nothing to him. She slowly moved towards him, saying she was trying to avoid sidelong glances. Coming almost right up to him and not giving him time to think about her previous words, she continued that she had found this place, and that was why she was sitting here. From such a close distance, he had to turn his head to the side to see her and ask if she knew the language. She immediately turned away from him and headed back, lying that she didn't know and was therefore going to close the book. As she did so, she heard her name called behind her, and then, interrupting him again, she answered for him that she herself knew that she was nobody. The butler immediately started shouting at her, because how dare she speak to the Baron in such a rude tone? But he immediately froze with a puzzled face. Eliana looked down on him, reminding him that how could some servant dare point a finger at the Baron's wife? They are not entirely pure in front of her, and even though her title is only in words, she is not going to tolerate such treatment. The blonde man in front of her said that whoever needs to know already knows everything. Without even thinking, Eliana answered that this was why he needed her, because someone had to cover up his unworthy behavior. Seeing how she had made him angry, he simply began to smile nervously. Turning away, Carmen went to the exit, ordering her to sit quietly and not stick her head out. And he slammed the door loudly, leaving her alone. As soon as he left, she immediately sighed, realizing that she couldn't even control her facial expression. Returning to the book, she began to think about how she could deal with the leader of the hunters. After thinking for a bit and feeling hungry, she decided to go back to the room. The light was already on in her chambers since it was already dark outside. She was sitting and drinking tea when she realized that the time had come. Putting the cup on the table, she began to pull the hem of her dress up, and with great effort she tore it apart. Suddenly, the door to the room opened unexpectedly. A girl appeared in the passage looking like the sun, saying that Eliana wanted to see her. Seeing the one who came to her, an unkind smile began to appear on her face. Quickly hiding it behind a mask of friendliness, she said that she was glad to finally meet her adopted daughter. Sharchin turned white with shock, immediately asking why the Baron hadn't told her anything. Getting down to business, she returned to her previous expression, clearly amused, saying that she knew about Carmen's feelings for his adopted daughter, to which she immediately began to justify herself that everything was not so. The red-haired girl, smirking again, interrupted her. Looking at him with a haughty look, Sharon reminded him that the girl was still his adopted daughter. Immediately seeing how her face had grown dull, she continued that she was still the Baron's wife. Her stepdaughter couldn't find the right words, so all she could do was be angry at Eliana. Looking at this, the girl could not stop thinking about how everything that her interlocutor was feeling right now was visible. Letting go of that thought, she began to focus on something else. She began to read a book she found in the library, not paying attention to her husband's beloved, and said that she could go. She sat with her legs crossed, continuing to read enthusiastically. But then suddenly, Sharchin's gaze fell on the slit in the girl's dress, drawing conclusions for herself. She immediately started screaming and asking questions about what she was doing with the Baron in the library and what they were talking about there. As soon as she calmed down, the girl immediately told her that she should ask her beloved Baron about this, and demonstratively turning attention to her torn dress, she asked who was responsible for mending clothes. But by this time, Sharchin simply couldn't be stopped. All she did was mumble to herself to us. Eliana looked at her and did not understand what was happening, because what was happening now was not part of her plan. It all happened too fast, one raised hand, and the blonde girl is already sitting on the floor with a mark on her cheek from her slap. Making an expression like that of a defenseless lamb, she began to slander that her stepmother had called her to her and slapped her. Eliana looked at her in confusion, listening to her say that she would try not to tell anyone about this, but it was unlikely that would work, since Carmen was so caring towards her. She didn't think long and began to pretend to feel sorry for her, and, making sure that she did not spread false rumors, she slapped her. Taken aback, Sharhan looked at her with shocked eyes, realizing that she had just been hit. The girl looked down on it all, telling her adopted daughter to go and tell the gossips about it. After all, she just got a real evil stepmother. After this incident, Carmen burst into her chambers, screaming. He walked menacingly towards her, not understanding how she dared to touch Sharchin. She just blinked her eyes and innocently asked how he could even think that. The Baron didn't pay attention to her words, he just continued to yell at her, saying that she kept lying and lying. To which Eliana calmly replied, as his beloved asked about what had happened between them in the library, if anything had happened there. He couldn't believe a single word she said, because all he could think of was that she was trying to set him against Sharchin. She didn't understand how he could lose his head and common sense over some girl. But what can she do about the fact that he doesn't want to believe her, because from tomorrow everyone will start talking about what an evil stepmother she is, which is exactly what Sharchin is trying to achieve. To this he responded with only a few words, that she deserved it herself. Putting the book on the table, she reminded him that she had only married to save her family, and was she so stupid as to start a battle in which she would lose? After all, Sharchin has already become an unofficial wife, and even her conditions are like those of a baroness. He did not understand what she had, since all the conditions and the room of the Baron's wife were located here, to which she immediately replied that initially this was not the case, and only now did he understand why she was in the library then. But she was there because there was no one who could help her in that situation, when her eyes were opened to the terrible truth. In an attempt to put her in her place, he told her not to dare approach his adopted daughter again, otherwise a divorce would follow. She immediately wondered if he was confident in his actions. The Baron, dumbfounded, did not understand what Eliana meant, and only after that did the girl remind him that this would be the fourth divorce. Would secular society react normally to the fact that such an ideal man as Baron Carmen married an insignificant girl, and when they find out about this, the head of the government is unlikely to like it? From such a bitter truth, the man automatically began to grab his sword, shouting for her to shut up. Seeing his defensive reaction, she began to pretend to say how terrible this family is. The daughter slaps herself on the cheek, and the husband even tries to kill her. Every word hit me in the gut, making me tremble with anger, begging her to shut up or lose her tongue. Having conceded in this argument, she only said that she would not talk like that again. Carmen immediately began to leave, thereby making it clear that the conversation was over. As soon as the door closed, she only thought that there was no hope for anything here. She needed time to think about what had happened to her in recent days. But most importantly, she decided that for a family without a title and money, she should be the first to announce the dissolution of the marriage. It was still sunny outside. She stood in front of the mirror, combing her hair, thinking that she had nothing left to lose anyway, since everyone considered her a bad stepmother, so she would behave accordingly. The maid who arrived behind her immediately greeted her mistress. Turning around at the sound of her voice, the girl immediately demanded that they find her some dark, shiny fabric for her clothes. The maid began to make excuses, saying that she was not allowed to go in there, but Eliana didn't care about Rosanna's excuses. She also ordered to buy a dress of the corresponding color in the store that she indicated on the piece of paper. The girl immediately recognized the place because workers from drinking establishments often visited there. Seeing her doubts, Eliana immediately asked why she thought that since workers went there, the store immediately became a tavern. But the most important thing she added to her words was that the maid was obliged to report all of this to Sharchan. She saw her suspicious behavior from the very beginning and realized that she was sent to follow her, so let her carry out the instructions in the best possible way. Frightened, Rosanna immediately hurried out of the chambers, rushing to carry out all the instructions that she had just been given. Outside, as Eliana thought, everyone was already whispering about how bad she was. They chattered among themselves about how cruelly she had treated Mrs. Sharchan. Meanwhile, Carmen was sitting in his office. He was lost in his thoughts, pondering the incident between his wife and his adopted daughter. He was brought out of his thoughts by being told that there was definitely something wrong with his wife. The butler argued that she spent money in salons frequented by tavern workers, did whatever she wanted without asking, and was into cheap cosmetics. In the end, she was ruining the reputation of the hunting party, and the Baron himself understood this, which irritated him even more, because she herself told him about it. The whole house was talking about her, and the aristocrats were sending letters with concerns about the evil stepmother, and besides, Sharchan did everything to make these rumors grow more and more. The Baron lowered his head in bewilderment as he listened to all this. He said to leave her alone for now, and the servant himself did not understand why Carmen would leave everything as it was. He tiredly explained that she had been here for less than 2 weeks, so he needed to watch her a little longer. Turning his gaze to the chandelier and asking where it was, the Baron received the answer that he was in the library again. And the only thing he still couldn't understand after all this was what kind of person she was. And so another week passed. The bright sun's rays penetrated into her room, illuminating it with natural light. Eliana told the maid to tell the sweeping maid that she would be present at the dinner, to which she was immediately surprised. She didn't understand her surprise when she asked the question, because there was nothing wrong with joining in the meal since she was a member of this family. The maid immediately began to say that she had misunderstood everything and would definitely pass on her words. All this misunderstanding led to an awkward silence. But quickly coming to her senses, Eliana immediately said that it was time to start preparing. After all, she should show everyone the results she worked hard on all week. The door to the shop opened, ringing a bell, announcing the arrival of a customer. The girl approached and held out an envelope. Inside was a picture of bright makeup, and the man was immediately taken aback by it, saying that it would not suit her. But she was adamant, wanting exactly this makeup, and provided a good fee. Looking at the dresses that Rosanna brought her, she immediately saw that this was not what she wanted. Eliana wanted to be bright and without any restraint. At the end of the day, she added the final details to her look. The flower in her updo and the elegant earrings perfectly matched her outfit. The maid who arrived was immediately speechless upon seeing the girl's beauty, but immediately came to her senses when she was asked to take her to dinner. It was only when they were tangled up on the stairs that Rosanna admitted that she had not warned anyone that Eliana would be present at the meal. But the girl was not immediately embarrassed by this, realizing for herself that it would be even more interesting this way. Having reached the place, the door to the dining room opened. The inside was as luxurious as the rest of the house, and in the middle stood a table that could accommodate a large number of people. The Baron sat at the head of the table, clearly not expecting the arrival of unexpected guests. And Sharchan was in shock from what was happening to her stepmother, who appeared before them. Seeing their amazed faces, shocked by her beauty, she asked permission to always be present at dinner in the future, since she had been alone for so long. While waiting for an answer, she waved her fan as if nothing had happened. Everything changed since her arrival. Speechless from her beauty, even the Baron himself could not find words to respond to her proposal. Carmen did nothing but silently admire her as she came closer and closer. Sharchan saw his look at her stepmother and began to get angry because of it. Quickly coming to her senses, she greeted the Baroness, drawing their attention to herself. Sitting down at the table, Eliana repeated her question about their non-objection to push through, thereby suggesting that it was precisely because she was not properly fulfilling the role of the Baron's wife that various rumors had started. Having come to his senses, the Baron casually said that she should do as she wished, starting to eat. To which Sharchan said that she would leave, otherwise it would be uncomfortable for them to be with her. The girl objected to her, saying that it was not a problem at all. On the contrary, if they become friends, the gossip will disappear altogether. After listening to her opinion, the girl said that she also had a request for the Baron. She wanted them to visit the Pink Park again. While they were discussing this, Eliana was just enjoying the food. Having finished completely, she thanked them for allowing her to be present at dinner, thereby deliberately putting Sharchan in an awkward position with his goodwill after she hurried out of the refectory. Only after leaving there was she able to breathe a sigh of relief. She could not leave for a minute how tired she was of this loneliness in this huge place. She decided that now was the time to bring Benny here. The next morning, the carriage with the mysterious girl was already approaching the mansion. Standing in the chambers, Baroness Rosanna was indignant, asking who she was, since she was Eliana's main servant. The girl interrupted her and told her to behave accordingly, since her new boss was standing in front of her. She didn't understand how it all happened, because she was the one who was appointed to be the servant. The mysterious girl spoke up, indicating to the lady that apparently the maid needed to be taught manners again for such an attitude. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, Eliana ordered her to stop making a circus and calm down. No one present expected this. Immediately realizing her mistake, Rosanna began to apologize on her knees. Eliana didn't understand why she should accept her apology. Fearing the loss of her job, the maid said she would change and prove her loyalty. The girl decided to give her another chance, but she had to get information for their trust. Rising from her knees, she vowed that she would do everything possible to achieve this. As soon as she left, Elena stood up from her chair. She immediately changed when she was alone with a man she truly appreciated. As she hugged Benny, she even began to think that everything was as easy as before. She sincerely repented before her that she had called her to this battlefield, but how could she have acted differently? The girl replied that none of this mattered because she was ready to do a lot for her. And only at that moment did Eliana realize that she was truly happy. Even though Benny was a servant, she was always considered a member of the Rose family. She never asked for anything in return and was very grateful that she appeared in their lives at one time. They didn't even notice how dark it was outside while they were talking. As she walked down the corridor, the moonlight gave her dress a delightful charm. Having reached the place, they exchanged glances, starting the plan. A tall, dark-haired man stood in front, guarding the door to the room. Coming close, she whispered that she knew a big secret about one guard, to which he was immediately surprised when he realized what she meant. Everything was going as she thought, and she couldn't help but be happy about it. Grabbing his hand, he still didn't realize that he was trapped in her. And before he realized what was happening, she quickly dragged him inside, leaving Benny to stand guard. The people around were even distracted from their own affairs, watching what kind of commotion was going on there. The man was taken aback by her behavior. As soon as they were alone, the man immediately became nervous, attracting a lot of people outside with his voice. Just by putting her finger to his lips, he immediately fell silent as she had asked. Seeing this, she told Joseph to listen to her very carefully. She immediately warned that after this meeting he would be interrogated to find out information about her and would even be offered money. Having immediately hinted at his deplorable situation, he will need to tell her everything he knows about her, and then he will be able to earn a little money. He immediately asked why the girl suddenly started talking about this, to which he received a very clear answer. Eliana admitted that her goal is to take money from the rich. No longer feeling threatened, he immediately opened up to her, asking about the terms of her offer. She said with confidence that he would have to tell them what they would ask him, and the most important thing in her conditions is that he will have to love her. After her words, he immediately began to feel embarrassed, which could not help but bring a sincere smile to his face. She took his hand, vowing that he would now earn more money for his family. After all, now he will have to become the Baroness's lover. Taking him to the window, she said that they needed to act so that their Baron could see them. Still as embarrassed by her, he was still afraid of what Carmen might do to him. She said that he shouldn't be afraid because he couldn't do anything to them, since he had Sharchan. Putting her hand on his chest, she said that she knew what rumors were going around about her, and therefore did not want to impose herself. But by leaving a short distance between them, Eliana spurred him on to take the risk. He couldn't believe his eyes. How could she ask for such a thing? His hand immediately hung in the air when he noticed something. And she noticed it too and turned her gaze towards the noise. Immediately coming to her senses, she moved away from him, taking his silence for a refusal. But then he suddenly pulled her towards him, not giving her a minute to come to her senses. Blinded by her beauty, he was unable to tear his gaze away. But how could he act otherwise than to do everything for her sake? Her heart was pounding wildly from such an impulse on his part, and his words did not give her peace. After a while, she came to her senses, only briefly smiling at the man. Looking back out the window, she saw Carmen looking at them, and she liked it. She was looking at him when she hugged Joseph. Even from this distance, she noticed how his face was swollen with anger, and this could not help but please her. Deciding that they had seen enough, she closed the window. Now, once again left without prying eyes, Eliana asked the guard if he knew anything about Jillian. He immediately understood who they were talking about, telling her everything he knew. Jillian Hurt was a naval officer and mentor to the Hurt clan who helped the man leave the Hunter lineage. His sister Helen was Carmen's ex-wife. She loved him very much, and after the divorce, she did not even leave the house, refusing every proposal of marriage, remaining faithful only to the Baron. And even that short information was not enough for her. Using her feminine charm, she began to ask him to tell her everything he knew about this man. Hearing this information, which she herself knew very well, Eliana began to get angry at his secrecy. He didn't understand why she needed such information about the officer, but she answered without even hiding that she had the same reason as he did. She confessed to him that she also had sick parents and younger brothers and sisters who were very difficult to care for. And to get out of all this, she behaves properly, and it is for this reason that she needs to know about Jillian so much, and this made him trust the girl more and more. Having confessed to him, she hurried to walk through the library, but he immediately called out to her, forcing her to stop. Sitting on one knee, he gave her an oath that he would do everything possible to get them out of this poverty. Sitting down at the table, I sincerely did not expect such a promise from anyone. But this couldn't help but touch her somewhere deep in her soul, for which she sincerely thanked him. Left alone, she again immersed herself in reading while simultaneously writing a letter to someone. By that time it was already completely dark outside. The vase flew to the floor, shattering into pieces. Sharchan stood over her, cursing everyone in anger. She could get rid of the terrible thoughts that were creeping into her head, that were making her lose her temper more and more. The girl smashed everything around her, screaming about how much she hated Eliana. Nothing helped to get rid of the image in which she appeared at dinner. Even her dress was different from what was currently in fashion and was not vulgar, but remembering Carmen's look simply drove her crazy, causing her to burn alive with anger. But as luck would have it, she almost injured her leg by slipping on the glass. She ordered the maids to bring her a tailor immediately to order new dresses in order to calm down, to which they immediately pointed out to her the large expenses this month. Following this reproach, she immediately began to remind them that Carmen had never spoken about her expenses. The maid could not disagree with her, but there was too great a difference between her and the Baroness. Hearing the reminder of Eliana, she immediately slapped the maid. For her, she will always be the Baroness and not some girl from a poor family. The maid, without showing any emotion, immediately apologized to Mrs. Sharchan. And hastening to leave, she repeated that she was waiting for a tailor who would sew dresses that no one else had. The Baron sat in his office with documents, listening to the chief servant of his adopted daughter. She explained to him why Sharchin suddenly needed a tailor. He just sighed tiredly, asking them to do as she asked. Maybe this would help her pull herself together faster. But then his gaze fell on the maid. He immediately noticed the red mark on her cheek, wondering why Sharchin slapped her. She honestly admitted, retelling him the whole situation in her chambers and that she accidentally mentioned Eliana. Asking if it was a mistake, the girl nodded positively. Seeing her remorse, he told her to go away. She hurried away, leaving them alone with the Baron's assistant. The servant expressed his dissatisfaction with their work because they were deliberately irritating Miss Sharchin. And even today, what happened in the library between Eliana and the guard was simply ridiculous. Immediately reminded of this, Carmen began to get angry, ordering him to stop making noise. He saw them in such indecent behavior. But she probably saw them there outside the window, which added more tension to the situation. The Baron, without realizing it, was angry that this didn't bother him one bit. The Baron tried to bring him out of his thoughts, intending to say something important. He repeated again for him to shut up, but Pepe could not calm down. As soon as he said it, the Baroness changed everything. Shock blinded him when he said she was interested in Gillen. He immediately stood up from his seat, not believing what he had just heard. Immediately asking questions about this, the man explained that Eliana bought this information and the guard Joseph for earrings. The Baron chuckled at his words. But then he began to get angry again that she allowed him to hug her without thinking that he was capable of betrayal. She pretended to be smart, but turned out to be an idiot. But it doesn't matter as long as he has the situation under control. While there was confusion in the hunter's house, a letter arrived at the Herd Palace. Hearing a scream outside, someone went to investigate what the noise was about. Having snatched the letter from the butler's hands, the man began to read it. From the first lines, anger appeared on the man's face, thinking that this letter was from Carmen. But the butler immediately explained that this letter was not from him, but from the new Baroness. The butler immediately began to explain who she was, thinking that the gentleman did not know the woman who had sent the letter. He immediately brushed it off, saying that he knew everything perfectly well. Her attention was drawn to the letter in her hands. It said that Eliana knew about what happened when Helen was married, and that she was having just as hard a time as she was then, but she found solace in her diary and therefore wanted to meet her in person. He immediately remembered how various rumors began to circulate about her regarding her terrible treatment of Sharchin. The man thought that the Baron had finally met his match, but after her letter he changed his mind about it. Jillian's sister immediately rushed to him. She immediately asked him about the letter. After accepting it, they explained to her that it had been sent by Carmen's new wife. The man discouraged her from strengthening it, saying that it was from the Hunter clan. He didn't want his sister to suffer again like she had at the hands of that family, but she thought otherwise, thinking that it would be better this way. On the contrary, she would like to meet Alina Rose in person. The man did not believe what was happening because his sister wanted to meet someone for the first time. Beaming with happiness, he ordered the butler to bring the most fashionable dress in honor of such an event. Helena immediately began to make excuses because she already had a lot of dresses. But Jillian was adamant. He wanted her to appear in public looking her best. For taking such care of her, she could only thank him. As soon as she left, the young man went to the guard. He asked him to provide him with all the information about Eliana. Absolutely everything about her past and present, since she comes from a family of hunters, already means that you shouldn't relax. Meanwhile, it was already clear outside. A letter with a reply from Helen had already been delivered to the mansion. Benny was already heading towards Eliana with him, not paying attention to anyone, but her idol was immediately interrupted by someone's voice. This was the head maid, Miss Sharchin, who was in charge of the other maids in this house. Not paying attention, the girl moved on, passing by her. At that very moment, they called out to her again, but this time they grabbed her by the hand to make her stop. Benny immediately pulled her hand away, not wanting to have anything to do with her, thinking the maid wanted to quarrel with her. The girl said that all letters to the Baron's estate first passed through her, and this was the first time she had seen this letter. But how wrong she was in her rightness, because Benny was also appointed senior maid, and she will follow the instructions that Mistress Eliana entrusted to her. Turning to threats, the maid replied that everyone in this house must obey Miss Sharchin, and if she did not follow the rules, she would report everything to the Baron. But the girl didn't care because she could also tell the Baroness that her adopted daughter was angry because of some letter. Leaving the two of them, the eldest maid called out to Rosanna. She needs to get this letter by any means necessary and bring it to Miss Sharchin. By that time, Benny had already arrived in Eliana's chambers. She immediately told her about the conversation with the maid on the street. Having drawn conclusions, the Baroness immediately realized that they would return for this letter. She is a nobody here, and they think that is why they can do whatever they want. Getting to the main point, she opened the letter. The reply said that Helen was very glad that she had written to her first and hoped that they would be able to meet soon, and below it was said that if she dragged his sister into this dirty story, he would not leave it so easily. The way Jillian took care of his sister was amazing. And after reading the letter, she brought it to the candle, burning all the evidence to the ground. After warning Benny that if they threatened her again, she gave them the envelope, having put a new letter in it beforehand. Eliana didn't want her loved ones to suffer. The maid understood her and said that she would do everything as she asked. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. The girl looked into the room, asking permission to enter. Rosanna appeared on the threshold just as Eliana had expected. The maid rushed along the corridor towards Miss Sharchin. She was happy that she had completed the task, but she held the treasured letter in her hands. And so one day passed. Sitting in the refectory, everyone enjoyed their dinner. Breaking the silence, the Baron asked her to cancel her meeting with Helen Hurt. She knew he was aware of the matter since he started talking about it. Listening to their conversation, Sharchin sat contentedly because it was she who had already reported everything to Harrow about the letter that Rosanna had brought her. Eliana said that she would not cancel the promise even if he was against it, to which Carmen immediately began to object, immediately reminding him that she was a nobody in this house, since she even had to give letters to Sharchin. He immediately hit the table with his fist, thereby reproaching her for the words she had said. He was seriously angered by her behavior because everyone knows perfectly well that she is only like that in words, but in reality she still does whatever she wants. They began to taunt each other, escalating into threats. But the biggest blow to Eliana was his words that if she began to allow herself more, he would stop sending financial support to the Rose family. She immediately fell silent, staring at him. How could he say such things to her and threaten her family so easily? Without even touching her food, she rose from her seat, saying that she had allowed herself to be rude to Baron Carmen and Miss Sharchin. Sitting on her knees, Eliana offered her deepest apologies, asking that the Baron not treat her family like this. The man was shocked by her sudden apology, because this was the first time she had shown herself from such a side. And Sharchin, who was sitting next to them, was gloating in her soul, seeing how the hated stepmother was humiliating herself in front of them. But Eliana didn't care about this, because she would do anything for the sake of her family and their good. Then, quickly coming to his senses, Carmen ordered her to behave appropriately and get up from her knees. But she reproached him for having just announced in front of everyone that he would make her family starve. She looked at him with pitiful eyes, asking if he had said this in order to get an apology for her wrongdoing. The Baron only explained to the girl that she had misunderstood everything and that she should not give rise to new rumors. She immediately sat back down after listening to his excuses. Sharchin, who had been silently watching them the whole time, began to signal her presence. She pretended not to understand what was happening, saying that the situation was absurd. The girl sought support for her rightness in the eyes of Carmen, luring all attention back to herself. But he didn't listen to the two of them, completely immersed in his thoughts. He glanced around the room, looking for signs of suspicious behavior. The man couldn't help but come to terms with how cleverly she had fooled everyone. His wife was too dangerous, but at the same time so charming. Only after that did he answer Sharchin, not wanting to discuss the earlier event with her. She didn't expect such treatment from him, feeling his cold-blooded nature for the first time. Turning his attention back to Eliana, he mentioned the upcoming ball, namely that he plans to appear there accompanied by Sharchin. Hearing his words, she immediately wanted to object to this. Sharchin saw her reaction and got ahead of her, justifying herself by saying that they always did this and it had nothing to do with her. But immediately after her words, the girl fell silent. She was lost in her thoughts, seeing how they wanted to put her in her place again in this house. Seeing no point in arguing with them, she simply agreed with their statement, saying that it was time for her to leave. She pretended to be hurt by their words, sadly adjusting a strand of hair near her face. And Carmen saw her disappointment, but still decided to remain silent about it. But then he heard her calling out to the very same guard she had hugged in the library. Joseph immediately ran to her, ready to fulfill any request she might make. She asked him to take her hand as they left the refectory. When they walked away, she immediately took off her poor sheep mask, looking at Carmen with a grin so that only he could see it. The door to her chambers opened. Once inside, she immediately sat down in a chair, thanking the guard for his help. She opened her eyes wearily as he called her name, drawing her attention to himself. The man promised her that when he got a promotion, he would never allow her to experience such humiliation again. He was confident in his words, and it was evident in him. Eliana did not expect such a confession, and the blush on her cheeks gave her away. The girl smiled awkwardly, saying that she would accept the promise given by her ally. She also swore that she was not going to leave him as a guard forever. To which Joseph, like a real man, kissed her palm in gratitude. After some time he left her, returning to service. She was talking to Benny, giving her the latest news about the ball, but everything turned out just as she thought. Eliana asked the girl how she liked her performance, to which she replied that even she almost didn't believe it, sensing a note of sincerity. The girl smiled at her, realizing that Benny would see her real self everywhere, no matter how much she could hide it. She remembered her message and asked Benny about the answer to the letter she had asked him to give to Roseanne. The maid replied that the meeting would take place tomorrow at 3 o'clock in a bookstore near the pier. The next day, Eliana stood as always in a luxurious dress, sorting through the books on the shelves. Today she was looking for a specific book about social events. After all, aristocrats probably wrote in such books how to behave there, and there will certainly be a hint in them on how to show yourself at such an event. Having found what she needed, she called out to Rosanna. She handed her the necessary books and ordered her to go back to the estate. The girl obeyed her and went to the checkout. As the maid was leaving, a mysterious man entered the store. He walked confidently straight towards Eliana. The man had heard about her, speaking of the unusual outfit of the huntress. Officer Jillian himself stood up in front of her. The girl looked at him, taking his words about her appearance as a compliment. He immediately hinted that, as rumors say, she really was a bit eccentric. She agreed with his words, but wanted to correct one detail. The girl claimed that she was not a hunter, but was Eliana Rose. He moved away from her, clearly not expecting such behavior on her part. Her hand hung in the air, not allowing her to touch Jillian. Realizing his actions, she walked past him. But then she stopped. Eliana turned to him and asked heads or tails. The day before, he passed his letter to Jillian through the maid. The girl wrote in it that he could first meet her himself if he was worried about his sister, and if the coin came up heads, he would give the go-ahead for their meeting. But if it came up tails, this would not happen. He told her to check it herself when she paid for the books. She nodded silently as she walked towards the shop owner. Approaching the cashier, she asked to be checked out. The treasured coin that would decide her fate was already in her palm. After this, the girl hurried out of the bookstore. As soon as Eliana went outside, she looked at what she had gotten. Hunter Jarek, from the line of hunters she had heard about, probably knew about Sharchin and was waiting for the right time to get rid of her. She wrote in the card and thought that surely he, as her husband's enemy, could be her potential ally, because they both wanted the same thing. Completely immersed in her thoughts, she didn't even notice how she drove up to the mansion. As she got out of the carriage, she saw that Carmen was already waiting for her at the entrance, asking her where she had been. You can tell from his face that their conversation will not be very pleasant. Eliana replied that she was in a bookstore. Hearing her answer, he wanted to broach the subject of the ball again, but she interrupted him, saying that she had already heard that he was not going to go there with her. Tension arose between them as he continued to talk about how she would not be riding in the same carriage with them, and therefore could not be there on behalf of the hunting family. She was shocked by what she heard. She didn't understand how he was only interested in situations in which she was humiliated and insulted, and did he really have to say it now? It was now when, out of loneliness and hopelessness, she decided to go out into the city to unwind and returned home. He didn't understand what upset her so much because, in his opinion, she was a girl who didn't know what loneliness was. Eliana was upset, realizing that everyone in this house thought she was heartless, but she didn't want to continue this pointless conversation, thereby putting him in an awkward position. As luck would have it, in addition to this situation, clouds were already gathering outside, foreshadowing rain. The servants were already looking out of the doors of the estate, listening to every word in order to find information for new gossip. Alina has simply become boring with her pretense of being an unhappy woman, giving more and more reasons for stupid rumors. She stopped his attacks only by asking that it seemed he trusted her less than the dirty talk behind her back. It was already pouring rain outside, but they didn't care. The girl said that she didn't like people either. She herself was sick of people who slandered her, listening only to those who were against her. She didn't even notice how tears began to flow down her cheeks, begging him not to treat her like that in front of everyone anymore, because there was already so much shame in her life. Having calmed down a little, she wiped away the remaining tears, saying that she understood him about the ball. She left him alone to get wet in the rain with this load on his shoulders as she walked past. Benny called out to her, seeing the state the girl was in. The maid walked behind her like a support, encouraging her to move only forward no matter what. In her chambers, she approached the bed. She collapsed tiredly onto her, beckoning the girl to her. Benny sat on the edge, asking what she wanted. Eliana asked her to spread the word that she had ordered silence about today's conversation and to punish someone if necessary. The maid immediately guessed that she wanted to use this to her advantage. And she was right, because if something is forbidden from above, she always wants to do even more. Meanwhile, the rain cleared, replacing the morning sun. Eliana sat in her chair as usual, drinking tea. She remembered yesterday's conversation with Jillian, looking at that very coin in her hands. She looked at it from both sides, realizing that luck was on her side. The girl opposite immediately asked what kind of insidious thoughts were making her smile. The man was very kind to her, but he had no idea that the coin in her hands had heads on both sides. Benny asked what she was planning to do with the nice gentleman. But it was still a secret, and many details needed to be thought out before talking about it. She was asked if she would go to the ball with him, but she shook her head, since everyone would immediately start pointing fingers at him, calling her a lover she didn't need such attention. People love to exaggerate everything, and even in the morning, rumors were already circulating throughout the estate about how Carmen had insulted Eliana, and she had cried because of him. But all this didn't matter as long as this arrangement was in her favor, pretending how unhappy she was. Quickly changing the subject, the girl asked Benny to go home tomorrow, to which the girl was even surprised by such a sudden request. She had no one to ask about this, because she was the only one here whom she trusted, and who could check if everything was okay there. But Benny was not so embarrassed because of this. She simply did not want to leave her alone, knowing that the whole house was against her. Having heard the true reason for her confusion, she hastened to remind her of one incident from the past that was forever etched in her memory. It was a harsh and hungry winter. The difference between the temperature outside and inside was small, and the piercing wind penetrated through every crack. The Rose family sat in front of the fireplace, wrapped in everything they had in the house, trying to somehow save themselves from this frost. On top of all this, they were almost out of food, and the only thing left was potato soup and a little stale bread. It was Benny who was next to her at that moment. She quietly took care of Eliana while she thought about how to save her family, not even thinking about her own health. Remembering that period as if it were now, she swore that she would never allow such a thing to happen in their lives again. The maid tried to stop her, but she did not listen. The girl vouched that if she had to pay with such suffering for this, she would be ready to accept it even 1,000 times. Benny heard her vow, taking back the words she had said earlier about her concern, because it wasn't just a girl sitting in front of her, but Eliana Rose herself. She also warned that as soon as the maid returned, they would go on a visit to the Hurt estate for a personal meeting with Mistress Helen. The girl was taken aback with horror, saying that the Hunter Pocket would not leave it so easily. But it's even more interesting this way. Who knows what he'll do with it? They just laughed at this, thinking how cunning Eliana was. Absolutely had to meet Helen before the ball to gain Jillian's trust. She needed the Hurt family to sympathize with her ex-husband's fourth wife, and then her plan. But before the visit, Benny advised sending them another letter. And Eliana also had to promise her something else. She should not put her life in danger under any circumstances. The girl did not expect to hear such a heartfelt confession, remembering what it was like when someone was worried about you. Quickly coming to her senses, she swore in the name of Rose that she would not do anything like that. The man wiped his face with a rag from the heat outside. The Baron stood with his assistant trying to make out something in the estate. The window was tightly closed, preventing him from seeing what was going on inside. But he still continued to look in that direction. Without looking away, Carmen asked how she was. Pepe replied that Miss Charchin was taking care of her skin, to which he was told that they were not talking about her, but about Eliana Rose. He didn't expect the conversation to turn to her, trying to somehow hush up the topic. Turning away from the gentleman, the man ordered the servant to go and check what the Baroness was doing. He thought that Carmen thought that Eliana was always causing trouble because she wasn't looking after her well. After a while, the servant returned with news. Having approached Pepe, he reported in his ear what he had learned in the estate. The man hastened to report to the Baron that the lady had not left the room today. Carmen was embarrassed by this, thinking that she at least visited the library, but she even had breakfast in her room. He asked what she had eaten, but this only confused the assistant even more. Carmen saw his reaction and immediately said that it was not so important. But Pepe thought that he was asking about Sharchin again, so he simply listed what the girl ate for breakfast, but he no longer listened to him and went on. He couldn't help but notice how strangely the Baron was behaving. Carmen remembered how he humiliated everyone yesterday about the ball. He knew that if he wasn't there, she would stand on the terrace all evening, completely alone. And for Sharchin's sake, he had to do this. But still Eliana made him behave strangely, all the time drawing his attention to herself. Rose was calm, intelligent, and charming, and perhaps he realized that she was very suitable for the role of Baroness. And it was for this reason that he tried to behave so dryly with her, trying to please Sharchin. The Baron sighed tiredly, trying to stop thinking about her before it was too late. The assistant saw that he was deep in thought and was afraid to disturb him, but he called out to her anyway. He conveyed that Miss Sharchin was waiting for him to show him the dress. With this, Eliana Carmen completely forgot that it was today. Hearing his answer, he happily reported that she had bought only 4 dresses, thereby trying to save her money. Pepe thought that the Baron would praise her for this, but it seemed to him that he didn't care at all. He only asked through gritted teeth how many dresses his wife had ordered then. The servant was distracted by this reaction, not understanding what he meant. Carmen was already seriously angry, sternly asking if he needed to repeat himself. The man shook his head in horror, declaring that the lady did not cause sweat by wearing the dress that she sewed with her maid. In that case, the Baron ordered that a tailor be called for her, and Sharchin was told that she could wear any dress to the ball. He went further, declaring that his beloved was beautiful in any form, and would not choose an outfit with her. Pepe, unable to keep up with him, only now realized that big changes were coming to the estate soon. It was already past midnight outside. In the bright room, a vase flew, breaking into pieces. Sharchin buried her face in the table, screaming that she didn't want anything. The maid standing behind her asked her to calm down, but as usual it didn't help. She picked up a pair of scissors that accidentally caught her eye. Sharchin walked confidently with them along the room. Grabbing one of the dresses, the girl said that he couldn't do this to her, because he had made a promise to her a long time ago. The scissors tore apart dress after dress. With each falling piece, it didn't get any easier, remembering their past. She was sitting alone on the asphalt in some alley. Completely desperate, Sharchin didn't know what to do next. But then only one outstretched hand made her see clearly. In front of her stood a man of incredible beauty, and it was in him that she saw her only chance for salvation. The moment he saved her, their love began. And even though his father wanted to kill her, he didn't run away, and their feelings still remained unchanged. And now she stood over these remains of the dress, calling one of the maids to her. She asked to tell Pepe that she cried, and even fainted because the Baron did not want to choose an outfit with her, as they did before, and the ball now has no meaning. Suddenly, Rosanna came to Eliana's chambers. She recounted what had happened to Sharhan, but she immediately said that Carmen's feelings for her had not changed, but that he simply wanted to bring the young girl to her senses with her help. She walked around the room, asking the maid how long the hunter Jericho would have to endure all the strange things that were happening in the estate. After all, she will probably tell Sharchin to be removed if she can't handle it. Approaching the window, she looked again at the maid, ordering her to go and convey that she would not invite any tailor. The girl immediately began to dissuade her, knowing that the Baron would never agree to such a thing and that she would simply anger him. Lovers are blind, and Eliana did not want to subject herself to another humiliation, so she did not care at all about the Baron's opinion. She looked at herself in the reflection, feigning regret about how she was being humiliated in this house. She repeated her request to Rosanna again, waiting for her to finally be left alone. The view from the window was amazing, but she was thinking about Carmen's feelings. Have they really changed and he regrets it? These children of rich parents are exactly the same. That's why he lives under the thumb of Sharchin, and nothing worked out with her. Having finished her thoughts, she went to the dressing room. She walked up to the mirror, opening a secret cabinet. Inside there was a book with a picture of a girl on it. Duchess Augustine Tenay, 40 years ago a flamboyant debutante in high society, was distinguished by her meek and quiet character, that even after 30 years of marriage she never danced with other men. This was Eliana's goal at the upcoming ball, to prove to the Duchess that there were still people who admired her by wearing the same dress in which she shone 40 years ago. However, this will only attract attention for a short time, and she needs to find a way to be remembered by the Duchess of Shadows more openly. Only in this way will she be able to get closer to her. It was already light in the estate. Benny returned to the girl with the news that her father was already feeling better, and her sister was learning to play with a famous artist. With a sigh of relief, she asked if the girl had received a response from Helen. She responded positively, saying that they had made a condition that the meeting would take place if Jillian was present with them. Eliana expected this outcome and she prepared a gift. The girl was going to give Helen Hurd a dress that she sewed with her own hands. Benny immediately thought it was a brilliant idea, but she immediately asked where she thought the girl got such an idea for a gift. She immediately realized that this dress was 40 years old, and that is why she wondered why Eliana refused the tailor. But the reason was not only this dress, but also because of Carmen himself, who went against Sharchin's opinion. There was never any consistency in his behavior, and seeing this, Benny always wanted to tear him apart with her bare hands. Eliana immediately hugged her friend, promising that she would definitely get out of here. They will still look into their eyes, full of regret for what they did. With their morale boosted, they got back to work on Helen Hurt's dress. Sewing together detail after detail with thread, they created another masterpiece. Heralding autumn, leaves began to fall from the trees. Eliana confidently walked towards the guards who were standing at their post. Coming closer, she immediately greeted Joseph. He said that he had only recently returned and had been entrusted with patrolling the estate. The girl asked if they could go inside to talk, because she wanted to tell him something. He just looked at her with confusion and didn't answer. She asked him to come inside again, but this time she said that she missed him very much. Joseph looked around, looking for anyone who might notice them. Not seeing anything suspicious, he opened the door, letting her into the room. Following her inside, he immediately slammed the door. Eliana walked along the familiar room to the window. Opening it wide, she sat down on the edge, asking the man if he knew about the new rumors. He looked at her with confusion, clearly not wanting to talk about something like that. The girl asked him to answer her honestly, because he himself knows that only he can convey such news. Joseph admitted that people are talking about Eliana failing at the social event. He felt disgusted to talk about such a thing, but he still continued reporting that many people wanted to come and see this spectacle, but there were also people who felt sorry for her. There were also rumors that she would soon be kicked out of the estate and a fifth baroness would appear. She couldn't believe her ears how far these rumors could go, asking him if he believed them. The man clearly did not expect such a question and was at a loss for words. She looked at him with hope, needing his support so much. The guard saw this and immediately declared that he wanted to protect her. She asked what he wanted to protect her from. Joseph admitted that he just wanted to protect her from everything, and that what angers him is that all this happened when he was not around. Eliana asked what he would have done if he could have been there at that moment. If he thought that there was nothing, he was deeply mistaken. After all, his presence alone gave her strength to continue fighting. She saw how she had encouraged him with her words, but most importantly, she wanted to ask if he would agree to be by her side at the ball, where his protection would be needed. When she said this, he felt his heart beat wildly. Joseph was very grateful to her and promised that he would do everything in his power. Turning her gaze to the window, she saw Carmen and Pepe watching them again. Eliana looked straight at him. Judging by his expression, he was not very pleased to see them together. Once she was sure they had seen enough, she closed the window, which immediately confused Joseph. She replied that the Baron had become angry when he was out walking and noticed her in the window. At first, he didn't even believe her words, but his face immediately changed when he realized that he wasn't even hiding his disappointment. Leaving the room, they headed somewhere along the corridors. The man asked what he needed to do during the ball. She replied that Benny would send him clothes made of good muslin. He immediately said that he would not be able to accept such a gift, but she said that she could, because he was her knight. Suddenly, the girl heard someone calling her. It was Carmen, who was heading their way, immediately attacking with questions about why she had refused the tailor, thereby disgracing the hunter race. She answered honestly that she refused because she did not meet their level. How could he say that she represented the entire family if she appeared at the ball alone? He didn't understand why his refusal meant so much to her, since everyone already knew perfectly well that she was his wife. He seriously thought that she would feel better if he spoke to her in such a tone as if nothing had happened, but it seemed that the Baron was not bothered at all. Carmen was only waiting for an answer to his question, and she answered it with consent, since he simply spat in her face, not caring in what state she would be present there. She was seriously angered by such a careless attitude towards her. He told her then at dinner that he would not accompany her, which meant that he would abandon her to her fate during her debut in high society. And how should she just come to terms with the fact that she will stand alone, watching him laugh with Sharchin while drinking alcohol? In order to agree to have the dress made by the tailor, he made a promise that he would make sure that she would not be left alone in the hall, in no case excluding her from the family of hunters. But even this arrangement did not suit her. She came closer to him, saying that she still would not wear the dress that their tailor would make. Eliana promised that she would answer the expectations of all those who were eagerly awaiting her shameful appearance in public, as he had wanted. The girl moved on, not paying attention to how he was still trying to get something out of this meaningless dialogue. Her last words were that he should not waste his time on her, but rather share his love with his beloved, as it was said that she had fallen ill when Carmen refused to choose a dress with her. He just watched softly as they moved further and further away. As soon as they disappeared from view, it immediately faded. He was overwhelmed with emotions about how some girl could have such a negative impact on him. Sunlight streamed through the windows of the estate. They all continued walking along the corridor, heading forward. The man walking behind her called out to the girl. He swore that even if Eliana left the Baron's estate and could not pay him £1, he would still become a loyal knight of the Rose family. She looked back at him, listening attentively. Realizing what he swore, a smile appeared on her face. The girl put her hand on his shoulder, saying that if anyone dared to spread rumors, thinking that she would be kicked out of the estate and left with nothing. He will have to spread the rumor that this is not so, because at least she still has such a faithful knight. He didn't believe what he heard, and that she called him her knight. Eliana pulled away from him, asking him to prove himself properly in order to become the best knight of the Rose family. The weather outside was still hot. Eliana calmly headed with Benny on the upcoming trip. Suddenly, someone started running persistently after her. The girl didn't even notice this as she continued walking towards the carriage. Suddenly, a girl appeared in front of her, blocking her path forward. Sharchin stood with a displeased face, foreshadowing something bad. Eliana looked at this whole circus that was happening to her and thought that this couple had gone crazy. Without thinking, Sharchin started another conflict, declaring that she should stop denigrating the Baron's honor and not go to meet his ex-wife. She shouted, asking how much longer she thought the head of the clan would tolerate such behavior. Eliana laughed at her confidence, but she was wrong in her judgment. After all, if the head of the family comes to the estate, she will definitely not leave here alone. Sharchin did not expect to hear such a bitter truth, but she could not answer, because her stepmother was right. Alina came closer to her, promising that she was not going to stand between her and Carmen. Squeezing her stepdaughter's shoulder with a little force, she told her to stay away, because if she fell ill again, the Baron would worry. Unable to bear such friendliness, Sharchin threw off her hand. She thought that the person standing in front of her was just some kind of crazy woman. Eliana grimaced when she heard such statements addressed to her. Unexpectedly for the girl, she didn't stop. Her punishment was that, to Eliana's objection, she would have to write down all her actions. With these words, she pulled her face away with such force that she heard a squeak. Sharchin, shocked by what happened, did not lose her composure and threatened that the Baron would not leave her alone for this. Eliana just laughed at her. If the pocket doesn't leave her, then what will she do if he pulls off his wife's dress? The stepdaughter did not expect to hear this, so she immediately began to hit her ears, cursing Eliana. But the girl was already heading straight for the carriage, leaving it to be hysterical. She stopped right at the door, thinking about something. Eliana promised herself that she would definitely win Helen and Jillian over to her side. After some time, the carriage arrived at its destination. Throughout the palace, shouts were heard that a baroness from a family of hunters had arrived. The servants bowed as Eliana walked confidently in front of them, paying her their respects. She looked around the estate carefully, and her gaze was drawn to a small statue of a ship. But this didn't surprise Darling at all, because she knew that there were naval officers in the Hurt family. Suddenly, something more interesting caught her attention. She saw Helen Hurt already heading towards her. The girl was very happy to see her, trying to create a friendly atmosphere. Eliana moved quickly towards her new acquaintance with even greater confidence. Coming within the permitted distance, she took Helen's hand in hers in greeting. The girl really wanted to meet her and could not hide her joy. Hurt just looked at her blankly, asking if they had seen each other before. To which Eliana shook her head. And it's true that they haven't met before, but she already knows a lot about the girl, but now she's going through such things in marriage, which is what Helen had gone through before, when she was one of Carmen's wives. Eliana admitted that she was surprised when she learned the truth about the Baron on her wedding night. Helen looked at her silently, not knowing how to react to these words. The girl saw her kind and vulnerable eyes, so much so that she even felt sorry that she loved Carmen so much. Helen's brother watched this sweet conversation from afar, drawing their attention to himself. Jillian appeared as usual in his best form, inviting the ladies inside to continue the conversation. They rushed towards the entrance of the estate, animatedly talking about something. The man watched them closely, namely Eliana, looking for a catch in her. He made a remark to the Baroness about her bright makeup. The girl took his words as a compliment, asking if he was really interested in her. Jillian didn't expect her to react to his words like that, so he just stood there with his mouth open in shock. The girls began to scold him for the way he treated Eliana, urging him to call her by her name rather than by her status. Gritting his teeth, he hissed, trying to be friendly, that he would do everything as they ordered, and leaving him in bewilderment, they moved inside. Eliana noticed that the inside of the estate was just as elegant as the outside. They were sitting in one of the rooms drinking tea. Eliana sat next to Helen admiring her beautiful dress and asked if the tailor had sewn it for her. The girl admitted without embarrassment that she did it all herself. Eliana did not expect to hear this and immediately declared that she had such a wonderful talent. Hurt laughed and said she could teach her embroidery if she wanted. The girl also complimented her dress, saying that it was especially beautiful. Eliana admitted that Miss was the first person to say such words to her and not call her a girl from the tavern. The brother and sister were shocked by her confession, not understanding how anyone could call her that, but Jillian still asked the girl to choose her words carefully in Helen's presence. She immediately apologized, saying that she came from a poor family and was not used to watching her language, remembering that men do not like such expressions. The man, clearly confused by her answer, said that it was not so. Eliana immediately asked him if he still liked the way she spoke. It was like a blow to his pride. Helen, who was watching them, couldn't stop laughing because Eliana was the first one who managed to embarrass her brother like that. Realizing this, the girl let out a laugh, watching as Jillian tried to come to her senses from what she had heard, burning with embarrassment. She turned to Helen and invited her to become friends. The girl immediately agreed to her proposal, but then her brother intervened, calling his sister to be more careful, calling Eliana an unusual lady. But isn't that what you have to be like to befriend the Hurt family, who even pirates fear? The man wondered whether she was right in these judgments. Helen suggested that the girl go look at flowers, to which Jillian intervened, saying that Eliana was lucky because his sister does not show their garden to everyone. Benny, watching from afar, could not notice how quickly the girl managed to become friends with Miss Hurt. Eliana immediately jumped up from her seat, calling the girl to hurry up, because they still had so much to talk about. The man threatened that if she got bored, he would not leave it that easily, but she was a married woman, and in fact, he could not do anything to her. He hinted that the girl had begun to cross the boundaries of what was permitted, to which she could only smile. Eliana took the girl by the hand, running away from the man before he caught up with them. And at that moment, Helen was sincerely glad that such a friend appeared in her life. In the center of the garden at the Hurt estate stood a huge fountain. Passing by it, they went further into the depths. The man lagged slightly behind the ladies, silently listening to their conversation. Suddenly, one of his assistants approached him, conveying some important words. He approached the girls, asking for forgiveness for having to leave. The man immediately hurried off somewhere. He stopped abruptly halfway, warning that if Eliana said something unnecessary to Helen, he would not let it go so easily. The girl replied that she had heard about his achievements. Looking straight into his eyes, she continued, assuring him that she would never dare to do something like that. She blinded him with her beauty, making him forget what he had said earlier. Jillian immediately hurried to run away from them before they noticed his embarrassment. Eliana remained in place, watching him run away. The girls went to the gazebo inside the garden, continuing their dialogue there. Eliana only now remembered the gift she had prepared for Helen. Benny silently approached the girl with the front gift in her hands, holding a box in her hands. The girl immediately opened the gift to see what was inside. Inside was a luxurious dress in a color that suited Helen perfectly. She sincerely thanked Eliana for this praiseworthy dress. Eliana explained that the outfit was based on the one the Duchess of Tenev bought 40 years ago when she made her debut in high society. Helen was surprised by this, not expecting that someone worthy of the table could dress so luxuriously. But few people know how the Duchess of Tenev got married. She was really interested in something like that. In addition to her passion for fashion, the Duchess also loved flowers. Although she did not know Helen personally, she often sent her flowers. Eliana smiled, noting that quite a few people treated Miss Heard so well. Helen quickly became embarrassed by her confession. But it also quickly faded, remembering something bad. She asked Eliana if her kindness to her was a chance to recommend her as a daughter-in-law to Madame Tenev. Eliana couldn't help but notice how attentive the girl in front of her was. However, she was still wrong about some things. After looking around their luxurious garden once more, she announced that she wanted to introduce not her, but Julian, to the Duchess of Tenev. Helen, when she realized what she wanted to do and looked at her in shock from what she heard, Eliana reminded that Madame had a beautiful daughter. Looking at the flowers above their heads, everyone understood that it would be quite difficult to find a worthy husband for her. Helen listened attentively to her words, her fingers shaking as she clutched the hem of her dress, not realizing that Julian hated arranged marriages. This reminded her of her marriage to the pocket, which upset her greatly. Butterflies flew over the flowers collecting pollen, but this did not hide the tension that was in the gazebo. Eliana looked at the girl silently, not knowing how to react to her statement. She tried to control her emotions, but it never worked when it came to that damned pocket. The girl confessed to Helen that she really hated him with all her heart, despite the fact that she was his wife. Eliana walked up to her, wiping the tears from her cheeks. It really bothered her that Hurt still had feelings for the Baron. She wanted to help her, but she didn't know how. After all, this arrogant idiot, including the two of them without caring, caused so much pain to so many girls. Helen looked at her with a gleam in her eyes as she had waited so long to hear such words. She breathed a sigh of relief, looked down at her dress, and warned that Jillian would not be easy to persuade. Eliana went through the conversation, stating that it was not necessary to force him. Helen looked at her with his eyes asking what she was up to. The girl admitted that her plan was to make them fall in love with each other. Helen was shocked because she thought that Eliana came here because she liked her brother. The girl admitted that this plan would make her brother more attractive. She needed to attract everyone's attention by spreading a rumor that she was an indecent woman. And Julian Hurt was perfect for the role. They don't know for sure, but perhaps the Duchess of Tenev's daughter herself has already pricked up her ears to this man. Helen immediately asked what Lady Tenev would gain from this, but she admitted that what Eliana does now means a lot to her brother. It was a very good plan, but one thing confused the girl. Who will save Alina herself when she carries out her plan, thereby sinking herself to the bottom? Eliana couldn't believe that Helen cared about her well-being. She really was a good person, and she didn't have to worry about it. The girl promised that she would make Jillian and Helen, and even the Tenev family, her close people. Helen was still worried about Elian and couldn't do anything about it. Then Eliana took her palms in hers, seeing what thoughts were now creeping into her head. She admitted that even if she wanted to, she couldn't be with Julian, to which Helen immediately began to insist that this was not true. Eliana saw the truth, and it seemed to her that there was a little bit of magic in it. Becoming serious, she called out to Helen. Eliana admitted that her main target is Jedediah Tenev,